Star Wars The Acolyte, Episode 1 through 8 review. This is not Star Wars. I recommend you play a game on the PS4, the PS5 called Jedi Fallen Order, and the sequel Jedi Survivor. And those games talk about a Jedi right after A New Hope, I believe, or no, right after Star Wars Episode 3 and before Rogue One. We get a story about this Jedi Cal Kestis, and he can climb. It's basically like Uncharted, where you can climb everywhere and discover these ancient Jedi temples. And going back and thinking about Knights of the Old Republic, and in Knights of the Old Republic, the droids were such a big part of the story. And it's funny that in Ahsoka, we see Old Republic droids still being used, right? In the HK-47s. But we barely saw any droid characters. I mean, the main character, she had that little droid that she had in her pocket, but it wasn't memorable like the little droid that Obi-Wan had in the Obi-Wan series, or that Andor had in the Andor series, or R2-D2, right? So droids are a big part of Star Wars. And where were they in the Acolyte? Because in this era, remember in Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, those R2-D2 units that you see on Padme's royal ship are new. And we didn't really get to see any of the previous what came before the R2s. We didn't get to see the R1s being used in the series. So there's a lot of things they didn't explain. There's also, in this series, there's supposed to be a villain. And this villain is made of living, like, matter. They have biological ships. The ships are alive. They go by the name Yuzan Vong, or in the High Republic, they were going by something called the Grisk, right? So, they didn't show those aliens, and that was a huge missed opportunity, because visually, that could have been something like when we first saw the Borg in Star Trek. So I also think the main character of the show, The Acolyte, I don't think the main character worked, to be honest with you. This is the first issue of the High Republic comic, the first High Republic issue right here. And I'm gonna read it, but you can see that I'm a fan, right, of this stuff. So goes through all the different eras right here. The High Republic, right, is the first supposedly era. So the High Republic happens I think like 100 years before the Phantom Menace. And Knights of the Old Republic, I believe, takes place like 1,000 years before A New Hope, or something like that. So this is like a prequel, right? And I hope the people who watch this show don't look at this and say, oh, I don't want to play Knights of the Old Republic now. Knights of the Old Republic is nothing like The Acolyte. And when it came out, the story of the first Knights of the Old Republic, you wake up in a huge battle over Coruscant, and you've lost your memory. But you go around and you're trying to find an escape pod. and Sith troopers have invaded this Republic ship, and you have to fight these Sith troopers, get on an escape pod and escape. And your character is a man, right? But if you're a woman playing the game, you can choose to be a woman. But obviously, I'm a man. When I was playing the game, I played as a man because in the game you end up getting a girlfriend in Bastila Shan, the female Jedi. This game was made before wokeism, and those first two Knights of the Old Republic games, you can actually play them on your phone. Uh, are not easy. They don't hold your hands. I'll tell you that. The Knights of the Old Republic games don't hold your hands. Uh, they're not easy, and it has a great story. That's the whole thing about them, is that they have a great story. The Acolyte does not have great characters. They ignore a lot of things that the High Republic book and the comics talk about. All right? We don't see these characters that are here in this comic, which this dude who looks like, I think, Bosk, right? A Jedi version of Bosk. But we didn't see these people. Instead, we don't see Yoda until the last scene of the last episode, and we see the back of his head. We don't even see the front of his face. And that's how the series ends. The series ends where we see the back of Yoda's head. And when I played the VR game, Tales of Galaxy's Edge on the PlayStation VR 2, they have a level there. They have two levels that are set in the High Republic. And in those levels, you see Yoda, and Yoda's training you. And in this VR game, I assume happens right after the Acolyte show, because right when the show ends is when you see Yoda. The VR game begins with Yoda training you. So my question to Lucasfilm: does the Tales of Galaxy's Edge DLC happen right after the last episode of The Acolyte? And there is a reference to Palpatine, because we see Palpatine's master, Darth Plagueis the Wise, who he talks about in Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. And they don't explain it. It's a random cameo. In the last episode of the show, one of the ships is taking off and leaving, and we randomly see Darth Plagueis come out of a corner of the dark. He looks exactly like Darth Plagueis from the books. Because, they made a book about Darth Plagueis. And it's a great book, it's a great story. But in this series, he's just a random cameo. And they had plenty of time to, they had more time than a movie. Right? Phantom Menace is 2.5 hours, right? Revenge of the Sith and Attack of the Clones are 2.5 hours, and they go to a bunch of planets and they introduce a bunch of characters. This show had 8 episodes, right? Basically, instead of a trilogy, they had 4 movie length runtimes to introduce characters, and the special effects are free because they're done all in-house at Lucasfilm. So Lucasfilm isn't charging them to use those green screens that they use, those 3D green screens that are like actual. It's like being on the actual. They don't get charged for that. So when I hear that these episodes are more, each one of the episodes of The Acolyte apparently was more than $100 million. And correct me if I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's what I heard. I heard that each episode of The Acolyte costed more than $100 million to make. My question to that is, where did the budget go? Whoa, where did the budget go? Because there is not one gigantic battle. There is not. The lightsaber sequences seemed like they didn't have any choreography. And there wasn't a good use of force powers. And I feel like the writers didn't know what they were writing. You know, Trinity's Jedi character was just there to be killed in the beginning. And Ki-Adi-Mundi, right, that Jedi from the prequel trilogy, we see him there in a random scene, and we even see Plo Koon. We see Plo Koon and Ki-Adi-Mundi, like if this were the Clone Wars, all right, and and they didn't explain that, right? They didn't explain why did we see some of the Jedi from episode 1, and how come in the 8 episodes they have, man, Yoda doesn't make an appearance. They don't go to that Jedi Council where you see all the Jedi, seated in a circle. And so I can't recommend, personally, I can't recommend The Acolyte. Okay? That's just me. I can't recommend it. And I've liked every other Star Wars Disney Plus show, right? But I don't like the sequel trilogy, right? I don't like the last half. Man, like Force Awakens got bad when they kill Han Solo. Then the movie like really lost me. Talk about, whoa, I was in there, and when they killed Han Solo in Force Awakens, I was like, this doesn't make any sense. That's his son, and he's just randomly killing Han Solo, and we didn't get to see all the characters together, like Luke Skywalker and Leia, and The Last Jedi. I mean, you're competing with a movie that did the Battle of Hoth. There wasn't something that was better than the Battle of Hoth in The Last Jedi. And that's what was so disappointing. And with Rise of Skywalker, I was like, man, you put out something like Rogue One. Rogue One was great, and my main thing is, why can't something like Rise of Skywalker be as great as The Mandalorian or Rogue One or Solo, So, my opinion on The Acolyte is it's as bad as Star Trek Discovery, guys. Like, how Star Trek Discovery didn't relate to its audience? The Acolyte doesn't relate to its audience. Okay? And I'm not just some person here who didn't watch the episodes. This is me reviewing all 8 episodes of Star Wars The Acolyte. And it doesn't help I am a minority myself. You know, I, I'm a Cuban Latino, and the main actress would go into interviews saying some really insulting things in some of the interviews. So the normally no one hears about actors from interviews on a random TV show, but the headlines of the main actress of The Acolyte, whoa, really controversial and like insulting my part of the audience, right? Insulting the real fans, right? I don't want to get into it or anything because, look, at the end of the day, we still have some great Star Wars content, right? In Star Wars Squadron, Star Wars Battlefront 2, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, and its sequel, right? So, like I said, some of the, you know, there's comics, there's the games. The VR game was pretty cool. You know, Tales from Galaxy's Edge has 2 levels where you're in the High Republic, and I really enjoyed it. You know, it's that, and the surprising thing is that I like Leslie Headland's other shows. I reviewed them. Russian Doll, right? Russian Doll was a really great show, but Natasha Lyonne wasn't involved with The Acolyte, and I think that she was really the talent on things like Russian Doll, you know, or Orange is the New Black, you know, so, or Poker Face, that's on Peacock, right? So, and really they showed these different kind of fighters, you know, in the show, but there was no space battles, and we didn't get to see like what are the capital ships, you know, do they have like a star destroyer, or, you know, what type of walkers do they have, you know, and we didn't really get to see that. They didn't address any of that. So, and you know, Admiral Akbar's planet is supposed to be a planet that's famous for building ships, and a lot of the lore and everything was like made by people who never read or never knew Star Wars, and I can't recommend it. I cannot recommend The Acolyte. Alright, guys, basically, it sucks. Okay? And here's the thing, the main thing is that the original Star Wars was about, what was the premise? The premise was that regular citizens are more quicker and independent thinking, right, than a large corporate empire, right? Then a group of ragtag individuals can put things together and think quicker than a galactic empire, right? And it was supposed to be a science fiction that reflected the industrial World War II era, right? And the prequels were about how that world came to be, right? How there was an era where people felt comfortable with their governments. And there was somebody like Palpatine to create a war, right? And this war was used as an excuse to take people's freedoms away and to push a military industrial complex empire, right? So, does this show, do you feel those types of messages when you're watching the show? No, you don't. So, and the characters are really bad. The characters are really bad. So I'm glad I watched it. So I have like an opinion on it. I can say I think this is the first Star Wars show that I don't like. The first one I don't like. And yeah.